As was stated in the introduction, my name is Kevin Lindsey, and I have the pleasure of serving as the CEO of the Minnesota Humanities Center. I am curious, how many people in the room have actually had an opportunity to be at the Minnesota Humanities Center by a show of hands? Okay, so I have a little work to do here today. So you may hear me refer to MHC, and if I do so, then I'm referring to the Minnesota Humanities Center. For those of you who've not been acquainted with the Minnesota Humanities Center, we're a nonprofit organization. We're located on the east side of St. Paul at 987 Ivy Avenue. For those of you who are unfamiliar with that part of the city's history, you should know that our building was the last building in the old Children's Gillette Hospital complex. We like to think of ourselves as a place of educational healing and learning. As the last building in the old Gillette Hospital complex, it is the last place, always like to knock on wood, that a child who had the diagnosis of polio was treated. So history is very important for us from our building and also as an organization. We like to start a lot of our presentations with a land acknowledgement. We'll see if the technology works with me. There we go. We like to acknowledge and start with the people who've had the longest relationship with place. This land has and always has been the home of indigenous people. Many of us are sitting within a few miles of some of the most sacred sites for the Dakota people, the place where the Minnesota River joins the Minnesota River joins the Mississippi River. The photo here shows a vantage point from Fort Snelling, which is a place of Genesis story and of power for the Dakota people. It's also a place of complex histories. So at the Minnesota Humanities Center, we have a program called Bedote, Learning from Place. We're very fortunate to have two indigenous scholars lead this effort for Bedote, Learning from Place. And what it shows is, while we have an understanding of place where we sometimes walk, sometimes we ride our bikes, sometimes we drive by, in order to truly understand place, it's important to have conversations with those people, those communities that have the longest relationship with place. I will beg to, and you will hear me say this throughout today, is that we need to have deep, further conversations so that we truly understand our history, ourselves, and when we do that, we're able to solve complex problems. And I would submit that some of the challenges that we have for successfully educating fully for our ELL students is that we don't have true understanding of the brilliance and the gifts and the talents of those ELL students. So, from the Dakota people, treat the land as if you were the caretaker for your grandchildren's children. So within this, let us come to approach problems as if we are looking to solve problems for our grandchildren's children, taking the long view. As was stated earlier, talked about the mission of the Minnesota Humanities Center, increasing collective understanding of ourselves, our communities, and our histories. How many of you are wondering sort of like, well, what do we even mean by the humanities? There's a dictionary definition of the humanities: history, literature, civics, jurisprudence, but it really all comes down to storytelling. And the storytelling within the disciplines of the humanities, it helps us understand ourselves, our families, the people who we make as our families, sometimes we call friends. It helps us understand the place and the society in which we live in. The rules of civics and jurisprudence, or the disciplines of civics and jurisprudence, help us understand the societies that we form and the rules of our society which we govern. Therefore, this idea of how we pass on and share stories is critically important for ourselves and for our society. Our vision is a just society that is curious, connected, and compassionate. Curious that we come to conversations with open hearts and open minds to authentically hear and listen to one another. How many of us have been in conversations where we know that the other person is already thinking about what they're going to say to us before we have finished our sentence? Can I get a, yeah. What if we had a society in which people were truly engaged in listening, truly engaged in hearing the other person? What a big difference that would make within our society. Connected, as Dr. King reminds us, that we're tied to a garment of mutual destiny. What impacts one impacts the other. This idea that nothing can happen where it does not create a ripple effect that impacts all people. And compassionate. Many of us in this room probably are very empathetic people, but when I take a look at empathy within the dictionary, I find that it's a noun. And what we really need is compassion. We need a verb, we need action. So, a just society that's curious, connected, and compassionate. Now, for the Minnesota Humanities Center, Amy provided some information about us having a retreat center. We also partner with a lot of school districts in taking a look at the education curriculum that they have. I had the pleasure, well, maybe pleasure is the wrong word. I served on the Social Studies Task Force, just making sure you're with me. And within that space, there are opportunities that the Minnesota Humanities Center might partner with the Minnesota Historical Society or other educators to work on Indigenous education or ethnic studies. And it was mentioned within the bio about the work that I did at the Department of Human Rights. There's a term called intersectionality. We tend to think about it in race and gender and sometimes sexuality. I would say cross-pollinization may be an analogous word sometimes within education. And I wonder, to this idea of ELL education and ethnic studies and indigenous education, is there some type of cross-pollinization or intersectionality of how we should be thinking about the respective work? A little bit about Minnesota Humanities Center. One of my favorite comedians is a gentleman by the name of Trevor Noah. Smaller incidents in my life made me realize that language, even more than color, defines who you are to people. Smaller incidents in his life made him realize that language, even more than color, defines who you are to people. Unfortunately for you, I am not as funny as Trevor Noah, but I will share a couple of personal stories within this space. My grandfather was an individual who was born in Sugar Lock, Mississippi. Well, actually, that's not right. The town actually was called Shaqualak, Mississippi. But everyone in that town referred to it as Sugar Lock. It was a very small classroom that they had within that town. No more than 800 folks lived in that town still to this day. The school probably might not even be as big as this stage. He went to what was referred to as third grade. I'm not sure that it would align with what we would think of third grade education here in the state of Minnesota. And as a young boy, I often was surprised of how he would refer to sandwich as sandwich, right? And of course, he would always ask somebody instead of asking somebody something. The way in which we use language and how we hear it impacts how we perceive someone. Everybody in agreement? Have we ever heard somebody where their first language is not English explain something in their language which they first heard at home? And we're amazed at how smart they are. But when they get to the second or third language, which they have sought to acquire, like myself when I try to speak Spanish, right? I'll say a little something, then I'll go up here and I'll think of that word, and then I'll come back down. It doesn't flow as well. And all of a sudden, the audience starts to question or wonder, how intelligent is that person? So I will submit to you that as a kid, when I saw my grandfather struggle with some of the words that I did not struggle with at a third or fourth grade level, I kind of wondered, well, how smart, right, is my grandfather? Little confession for a morning, right? But as I got to grow older, I saw that there are many forms of intelligence. And the fact that you just say sandwich does not mean that you're not a brilliant man. Because my grandfather was a brilliant man. He built 3 houses during the course of his lifetime. I am barely able to knock a nail straight, right? And when you talk about the intricacy of wiring within a house, and to make sure that the structure is fundamentally strong enough to support a 3-story house. That's a form of intelligence and smarts. Smaller incidents. It was mentioned within my bio that I was in Omaha for a certain period of time. How many of you know where Malcolm X was born? By a show of hands. How many of you are wondering where Malcolm X was born and why I mentioned it? By a show of hands. Temporal connection. Malcolm X is a place where he was born. He was born actually at home. I was born at a hospital. But his home and where my parents took me from the hospital is no more than a 5-minute bike ride. So most people don't think of Malcolm X having a connection to Omaha, Nebraska, but he does. In that part of Omaha, Nebraska, it is not what we refer to as the wealthy part of Omaha, Nebraska. This is the north side of Nebraska. The property taxes are relatively low. It is actually a poorer district than what we refer to as our poverty districts, which are identified by the federal government in St. Paul and Minneapolis. I mention that because my dad told me the story of when he was in 8th grade, and he wanted to be a pilot. And he was talking in which to his math teacher, and his math teacher, and not like you, she discouraged him from pursuing that. She didn't think that he would have the math aptitude to become a pilot. Now again, I told you that my grandfather was very smart, and I don't think the apple fell too far from the tree for my dad, but she didn't see the potential within him. Now here is somebody who taught himself at the early days of computers how to become a computer programmer, an IT person, as we like to refer to it. After he retired, he actually went back and graduated summa cum laude with a degree in accounting, and actually tutored students within that space. So this idea of not having the math aptitude for it, again, those small incidents sort of changing. What did she see within him, or what did she not see within him? When we talk about the impact of sort of students and how they communicate with us, how they present, grandmother always made sure that our jeans were always pressed. My wife always laughs at that about being finely ironed blue jeans. But she always wanted to make sure that even if she was not able to give the best, finest threads, that all of her children were clean and all of they were ready to learn for the day. Last story for you. Language. Was mentioned earlier within the bio, starting within law. International law firm here in town, really does not matter. I was on the phone with someone calling from another part of the state, or another part of the country, and during the course of the conversation, this person was trying to make a bit of rapport with me, and he then proceeded to tell what we refer to as an off-color joke. He didn't know who his audience was, because I know for the folks that are under 30, this was before they had Zoom. Can you imagine that? Rotary dial phones. So within this space, right, again, the power of language, right? Why could he not perceive that a person could be a person of color within an international law firm? He couldn't even see it. He couldn't even imagine it. Again, how do we put people in certain boxes or certain places by what we hear, what they say, what word choice, and how they elocute those respective words? Education remains the key to both economic and political empowerment. Barbara Jordan, former Texas Congresswoman, and in a couple of minutes I'm going to call up the panel, so I'm just going to get them ready for that. Now again, I appreciate, and hopefully I've teed this up as it relates to intersectionality. I'm going to give you some data concerning how we typically in the United States think about the issue of race, and we think about it in the dichotomy of white-black. But I obviously know that it's much broader than that, and I also know that, as Professor Mahmoud El-Kati, how many people from McAllister in the room? A few McAllister folks. He talks about race being a social construct. It's a powerful social construct, but it's a social construct. There really is no difference as it relates to race, the way in which we sometimes articulate within our society. But given that it is a powerful social construct. In 2019, McKinsey & Company, in a report called The Economic Impact of Closing the Racial Wealth Gap, quote, "The racial wealth gap constrains the U.S. economy as a whole. It's estimated that its dampening effect on consumption and investment will cost the U.S. economy somewhere between $1 trillion and $1.5 trillion between 2019 and 2028, roughly 4 to 6% of the gross domestic product." Let me say that again. $1 trillion, right? Almost need to have Mike Myers up here, right? $1 trillion to $1.5 trillion over a 9-year period. For some groups, and I'm just going to use African Americans within this, but again, I think this is applicable to others from the respective work that I've done at the state in addressing economic disparity and challenges on poverty. Again, from the report, the typical black household's wealth in 2019 was $24,100. For white households, it was $188,200. This translates roughly into black households holding about 12 cents for every dollar of wealth held by the typical white family. Now, why do I raise this up within this space for you is that I think oftentimes we talk about providing ELL instruction, or we talk about reaching out as a form of charity from the larger construct, right? We're doing this because we don't necessarily see the potential or see the positive impact all of these children have. And I would dare to suggest to you that we collectively need to push back on that, and push back on that incredibly hard. The economic viability of our region, of our country, is dependent upon the success of these children. They are our assets. They are our future. And as long as we tolerate and silence and acquiesce and do not push back, it is not only detrimental to them, it's detrimental to all of us. Now, what was not said within the overview is that I also changed workforce goals in construction for the state of Minnesota. What I said to various political leaders back in 2012 when I did that and adjusted workforce goals in Hennepin and Ramsey County from 11 to 32% for people of color is that, and what those leaders in the state had, some leaders in the state had challenges, they could not see what was already occurring within schools. I don't need to say this to this group. You were there on the front lines. You know that there is a large number of children of color within school districts throughout the state of Minnesota. You understand already that 1 in 10 children in the state of Minnesota are English language learners. This is a significant economic issue for the state to solve. You have the power to have a significant impact for the entire state. Do not sell yourself short. Do not sell yourself short about how important the work that you are doing. You need to raise your voice. You need to amplify the importance of your work. You need your work to be seen. Last thing that I'm going to say, and then we'll bring the students up. In the space of human rights and civil rights and discrimination, there is what's referred to as the curb cut effect. How many of you understand what I mean by a curb cut? Fair enough. So sometimes you're walking along a sidewalk, and then all of a sudden you get to the edge of the sidewalk, and then all of a sudden you see a little depressed area in the curb. So you're kind of walking along maybe 3 or 4 inches above the street, and then all of a sudden it comes flat and even with the street. And individuals in wheelchairs were one of the very first advocates for that. Can you imagine that, right? You're in a wheelchair and all of a sudden you have to go from a curb, go down 3 or 4. You'd fall out of the wheelchair, right? The curb cut effect is that what's good for that person in a wheelchair is also good for a guy who's almost 60. It's also good for somebody who's pushing a stroller, or is good for somebody who might be on crutches. It's good for a whole host of folks. In this space, the strategies and what you're trying to implement for EL students, I will submit to you, is good for a whole host of other students. The curb cut effect. Maybe we need to have the ELL effect, right? So with that, I'd like to bring to the stage our 4 guests to talk a little bit about their experience and what they're sensing within this space. Okay, Anna, Ion, Lucia, and Marcella, join me on stage. I trust that I'm not being rude, but there's no 5th microphone up here, so I'm going to stand up here and ask questions. So start to my immediate left. Could you please share your name, pronouns, what grade you received EL services, and then what you're doing now? Oh, sorry. There we go. And, well, can I get a little microphone help?
Hello?
There we go.
Oh my gosh.
I know we figured it out.
Hi, everyone. Hello. I am Lightsia Vang. My pronouns are they, she. I received EL services from K through 3 in the district Roseville area schools. I am currently a 2nd year at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities, and I study political science, sociology, and racial justice in urban schooling with hopefully a minor in Asian American studies.
That's good.
Aside from school, one of the main focuses of work that I do right now is youth programming. So currently my title is the Program Director of Youth Empowerment over at a nonprofit called Story Arc. Thank you.
Welcome.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ayan. I received ELL in my high school. Actually, start my alphabetical in 9th grade, so how hard is that? I graduated in 2018 from high school, and I did liberal art at St. Thomas. Now I'm doing nursing in Rasmussen. Other work that I do is just help my siblings.
Hello, my name is Ana Gomez. I am a high schooler in Stillwater High School. My pronouns are she, her. And like I said, I'm in Stillwater High School. And I've been getting EO support since I was, I think, preschool or kindergarten. I started young. And what I do right now is I just work and at a daycare center right now.
Good morning, everyone. I don't know if it's still morning. Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Mary Sala Zhang. I received ESL starting in kindergarten and up until 2nd or 3rd grade, my first few years of early learning. I'm now in my career field as a community engagement coordinator at the Capital Region Watershed District, and I've been in my career now for a couple years. So I graduated from Bethel University with a double major in environmental studies and reconciliation studies with a leadership minor.
We'll start at the end and then come back this way. What did you enjoy most during your experience as an ESL student?
I loved the communion with other students. I don't remember much about my time. There's only a few experiences that I can draw from very clearly, but I remember the sense of camaraderie in a shared unknowing of English. So, yeah.
Okay. Anna?
One thing I loved was like all the people that were in there, like my friends, and like just learning the language. Like starting that Spanish was my first language. It was kind of difficult for me to like learn English, but like now it's kind of good with my English. But I go like back and forth with English and then Spanish. So, yeah.
Thank you.
I remember when I first started freshman, I didn't speak any English. What I loved about my teachers, and if they are here, I'm saying thank you to all of you. I loved how they support and encourage and help me to be where I am today. Just imagine I start freshman and then now I'm not good at still, but I can do so. I also love how we were international school. I love how everybody were like speaking in different language, and then within that we were learning the English and we were supporting each other. I remember a Spanish friend that I had in high school. She was trying to help me, but then she doesn't know the English too. So we're all helping each other without knowing the language. So that was good.
You speak very well.
I think for me, I'm having a hard time identifying a particular positive thing. I think with my experiences, the result of it has been very difficult. But I think one thing that stands out to me is having that one-to-one support in schools where it may be a little overcrowded, where you don't always have that consistent conversation with your teacher or educator. I think I really appreciated that.
Well, picking up on that, we're going to go the other way now. So what are some of the challenges that you experienced as an EL student?
I have so many things to say.
You know, the nice thing is, in this nightclub, people were actually ready to hear. Kind of the nightclub kind of ambiance, right?
Due to receiving EL services, it centered the use of English. And with that, I lost my Hmong language. I've been dealing with the repercussions of that for, I'm 20 now, so 15-ish years now at this point, trying to grapple with the understanding that I have lost a significant connection to my Hmong people, my Hmong elders especially, the ones that hold the Hmong history, the Hmong stories of the lands in Southeast Asia. And I will never be able to learn it, because at this point, I may not know Hmong at a steady speed in order to communicate with them at this point. And so that is a loss that I am currently facing every day.
Is there anything else you want to share?
I'll allow some space.
All right.
For me, it was the opposite. I'm Somali, speak fluent Somali, and one of the challenge I faced was I had an appointment at Hennepin, and I came here with my grandparents. So it was always me and my grandma going to the hospital, and then we have translator every day. But then on that day, we were here, I think, 2 months. I was like, Grandma, I'm gonna do it today. I'm gonna go by myself. I'm gonna try it. And then I went to Hennepin, and the front desk register nurse asked me, what is your full name? And then name I kind of understand, and then I told her. And then she was like, can I see your ID? So then I was like, okay, maybe she's talking about this. So I give her like some of the social security and then ID and some of her papers. And then she was like, what is your date of birth? And I was like, hey, what is she talking about in Somali? And then she was like, what is your date of birth? And I was like, do you need another ID in the back? But then she just keeps saying it. She was nice. But then it was really hard for me to understand what she's talking about. So I said, I don't know. You need more IDs. I have nothing. I give you all of it. And then she was like, I can't let you in because you can't verify your date of birth, and I have to have the right patient to send in. So now I kind of understand how medical staff works. It's to verify the right patient. But on that time, I was so mad. She sent me back home, but I had that word in my mind. I was like, birth? Okay, I'll have that. And then I came back home, and then I asked my little cousin, you know what? They canceled my appointment in Somali. She says, why? I was like, she just keeps saying one word, and that was birth? What is that? And she was like, oh, that's your dalasho. That's your birthday. That's your day of birth. And I was so mad. So sometimes those kind of things were really hard for me, which is like, it was understandable because I don't know the language, and the nurses were helping me, but at the same time, it was really hard for me to do what I have to do in life. So that was one of them.
For me was losing my Spanish, because like I said, in school they taught me English, and right now I can speak Spanish and I'm kind of good at it, but like sometimes there are like these words I can't pronounce right, or sometimes like I can't understand it, but like it just was the Spanish I lost, but I'm still working on it. And well, yeah.
I think, can you repeat the question again?
Sure. What challenges did you experience as an ESL student?
So growing up in my household, I'm half Hmong and half Chinese, and my parents separated when I was young, so I was raised by my mom, who's Chinese, and I was the youngest out of a big family, so I think my mom kind of gave up on me. And I think I was misplaced in ESL. I know now that I've been misplaced. I just didn't speak. We didn't speak at all at home. There was just, I think that intersection of being in an intergenerational, multi-experienced home, there's a sense of silence, and also being Asian American, there's a sense of silence woven within our connection with one another. And so I think that the folks at school and my teachers, they saw my mom as someone who wasn't a really good English speaker, and then saw me, who didn't speak, and kind of made the assumption that this young person needs ELL. And at the time, it was English as a second language, so I kind of grew up a little confused at it all. Like, what do they mean, English as a second language? I don't have a first language. So I think a challenge is that I just didn't have the kind of support at school or at home to grapple with identity and language and finding myself in all of this. And obviously now I'm very grateful for my experiences, and I wouldn't be who I am without it. But I think, so my first response to the first question was I loved the camaraderie between other English learners. And I think the flip side of that was that I remember always getting pulled out of classes, and I didn't know exactly why. I just remembered that I missed all the cool things. And yeah, I think that there's a sense of resentment that I feel toward schools, and a resentment that I feel toward the adults at the time. So, yeah.
I'm going to stay with you. And then audience, we're going to put up a Mentimeter, and then you'll be able to ask questions of the panel. So this will be the last question from me, and then we'll go to the audience. What one thing would you suggest that we collectively should do differently in this area of instruction for students? And we'll start all the way to my far left on this, and then come back.
I know that there are, and I can speak on this because I have a lot of nieces and nephews that are fully Hmong. I know that they're in a relationship with the Hmong language now where they're a bit more removed, and we grow up speaking English in the home, so there's already a sense of language loss there. And I have a lot of friends that are teachers. I don't think any of my friends are in the, I mean, all y'all are friends, but I know that there are a lot of Karen and Burmese and Somali and Oromo students in our classrooms nowadays. And I was talking with a friend who works closely with Karen and Kareni kids, and she was expressing to me so many other things that are happening outside of the classroom that are impacting their learning. And I'm sure you all already know the culture of screens that our young people are dealing with, but because of that, they are exposed to so many things that are happening around the world. And so I don't know what an approach would be, or a strategy, or a technique for connecting with students now, but I think everyone needs a little bit more patience nowadays. So I would say, I would recommend, or what I would suggest, is that educators and folks that are in these spaces, working with these kids directly, being patient with yourselves and being patient with them. They care. Sometimes they don't, but they're there. And sometimes they all just need a loving adult in their life. So, yeah.
Thank you. And if you want to pass, anyone on the panel wants to pass, that's fine as well, too. I don't want to put you on the spot here, even though you are on the spot with the big spotlight here on the stage. But what advice or strategy might we collectively take on? And I know you are currently an ELL student, so I'm curious as to what you're thinking.
Well, to be honest, I was going to pass it.
Well, then pass it. You can take the pass.
Yeah.
Sure. What piece of advice or suggestion or idea on how we can be better at delivering for ELL students?
I would say teachers are doing so good because you're dealing with students who doesn't understand you most of the time. Like you're saying, you're telling them stories, you're reading to them lines, and they don't understand. So thanks for being patient. I would say look for someone who look like that person. Like if it's the students who are taking the ELL class, it's Somali, then look for someone who speaks Somali so that it will be easier for them to understand what they're doing and what it is that they have. And I also said more activity, because some people understand or learn easily when they're doing like activities, so more activities.
All right, thank you.
I think with the domination of English in the United States, that is oftentimes the narrative that our students have to just learn English. Therefore, their heritage language often disappears throughout that time. English and language has a significant connection to race and power. And so we have an opportunity here to really address that in our spaces as race, domination, white supremacy continues to affect our schools. And so telling them about the history of English and how that has been historically being used to marginalize people of color. I think it's important for you to reflect upon your own experiences with standard English. There is no standard English. And so why do we emphasize this within schools? What does it mean to be an English language learner? To learn grammar, punctuation? No, this is an opportunity for us to learn about race and its connection to language as well. Thank you.
Thank you, very powerfully stated. I see we have about 15 minutes here. I am going to call an audible. I think you are closer to the screen and you probably can see the questions a little bit better than my eyes can from here. I'll let each of you, if there's one question that you want to respond to or just a quick word reaction, and then I'm going to call my good friend Dr. Favor, the superintendent of 917, to the stage, and we're going to react to some of the things in which you've said. So I'll start again closest to me, then we'll begin. And I'm reflecting on something you just said. How many of you have seen the show I Am Not Your Negro by James Baldwin? Within it, he has a passage about talking about this concept of being white. And white really is emblematic of a euphemism of power. There is no white, right? So to this extent, when we talk about language and sort of what we convey and sort of the space that we're in, you're absolutely right. We're at a very interesting point in our country's history, right? Because of the changing racial demographics within the country, and then also the number of people who are aging out within our country. So all of the participants here on stage, when they enter into the workforce or have just started their careers in the workforce, they are going to see in America where 1 in 4 people are over the age of 65. I submit to you that is a fundamentally different economy than when I started in 1991 here in town, when only 1 in 10 people in the United States was over the age of 65. Which means that in order to continue to fuel the economic drivers within our economy, we're going to have to bring people in from other parts of the world. And those other parts of the world are going to be different than white European countries that we have normally immigrated people in from the world. So again, New York Times, 2045, 1 in 4 people in the entire world will be from the African continent. And we already know the number of people living currently on the planet from India and from China. So again, those future workers, they're going to look very differently than the prior workers that we had 20, 30 years ago. Let me do this. Can you all give a round of applause? And then I will bring up my good friend, Dr. Taylor. You can go back to your seats. Are the questions up? I just see the Mentimeter poll up here. Let's advance the slide. There we go.
I want to speak to the question regarding what characteristics made me feel more welcomed and valued and heard in the classroom. I think one thing that stands out to me is having a teacher of color in specifically working with you. I grew up in a predominantly white school with white teachers, and so I did not have that representation for me. And so I really want to applaud the teachers of color here today that are here and working with EL students. I thank you so much as you provide a tremendous role in being a role model in our spaces.
for me, I would say, actually, I'm going to change.
You want them to scroll? Can we scroll the Mentimeter here? Maybe not. There we go. Was this the screen that you wanted? Okay. Did you want to make a comment to one of the things you're reading?
There's so many questions. Thank you all.
I know, there's a lot of questions. Well, I'll tell you what, since we have about 10 minutes, does someone want to respond to one?
I think for one of my
Okay.
questions would be, what teachers inspired you?
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember her name, but she was like the first ever EO teacher that I remember. She was really sweet. She taught me, even though I didn't want to get teached anything. I went to the class and I was like always telling her, why do I have to be here? I don't want to be here. I can speak English. But that's what I thought, that I just needed to speak the language and that it's done. But it was the writing, the reading that I just didn't understand. And I am very thankful for her.
Maricela, do you want to respond to one of the questions, or?
Yeah, there's a question here on when I mentioned that I was always pulled out of the cool classes. Yeah, and how do I have any suggestions on how to avoid this? Don't pull them out of cool classes. Specifically, or maybe just replicate the cool classes, right? I remember loving the art. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was something to do with art, and we were like tracing the lines of the face through a shadow. And I remember having, and like really pushing to get out of ESL, so I was rushing through it so I can get back into class. And when I had gotten into the class, everyone had already had their fun and made their own memories with one another. And I was trying to catch up, like, what did she say? And then what did he say? And you can't replicate that. You can't make up for that time. And if I could go back, I would, but and try to advocate for myself. But yeah. Thank you for the questions.
So I'm going to thank the panel, and then I'm going to invite Dr. Favor up. So you should also know that this panel will be available for a later session. And I think, is it Dr. Chena? Yes, Dr. Chena from the Minnesota Humanities Center will be engaging in a story circle with the four. So you get a chance to maybe ask some other questions and do some follow-up. So again, help me thank our panelists. You can all take your seats. I'd like to call Dr. Favor to the stage. Well, I should let you introduce yourself just like I asked the other panelists. What would you say about yourself here?
Well, first and foremost, happy to be here. Thank you for allowing me to be in this space. It's inspiring to see so many people here on a Saturday. I know I would be watching college football right now, but it's really inspiring. My name is Mike Favor. I'm originally from Athens, Georgia. Grew up north Minneapolis, went to college in Fargo, North Dakota. So When you talk about being out of place, being in a different space, I've experienced that so many times on my journey. I've often been the first. First black superintendent where I'm at, first captain, college football in the history of the Bison, first black captain. And the journey has always been a very reflective, passionate journey for me. I've been a principal, Minneapolis North, principal at Robbinsdale Cooper, principal at Southwest, assistant superintendent, interim superintendent in Monticello, Minnesota. I didn't want to get put in this box that's called an urban leader. And now superintendent of Intermediate School District 917. Pronouns are he and him. I'm excited about my journey, excited to collaborate Minnesota Humanities Center. I continue to learn. And I just want to say this. We had a lot of success at Robbinsdale Cooper because of the importance of establishing a culture. Just like we're establishing a culture at ISD 917, where you often hear me say, we belong to each other. And showing that and modeling that is what I expect people that we work with, so that can be in place for children to see. We belong to each other, and I think it's very true. If you don't believe me, get on an airplane with a group of people and understand the importance of belonging to each other, even driving. So as you navigate as educators, how do you create that sense of belonging? And we've used Minnesota Humanities Center to grow our sense of belonging to each other by implementing story circles, because so often people don't realize that they all have a story. And often people are looking at, white folks are looking at other people's stories and don't realize they have one of their own. Other people's culture don't realize they have culture of their own. So we've had a lot of success in embedding that. I'm gonna say one more thing. While in Robbinsdale, two things helped us close the achievement gap and improve graduation. One of them was systemic alignment to the ACT and the state standards, vertically and horizontally, by using something called an instructional focus, so that students saw the material prior to taking the test, ACT test. So aligning vertically and horizontally with a 5-minute, 10-minute instructional focus really helped. The other thing that really helped us with achievement is had two incredible EL teachers. And they helped our staff use SIOP skills, SIOP training, because we recognized that we had some students who showed up, Liberian, Nigerian, also African American, who had language barriers, even though they may not present that way. But the SIOP training that we did with EL increased our achievement across the board. So the EL teachers, when we talk about achievement gaps, you are paramount, in my opinion, in helping systems understand how to work forward and work better.
Thank you for that powerful testimony. Within this audience, there are folks that are sort of on that front line, you as a superintendent now. We talked a little earlier about changing the narrative, changing, as you say, the culture. Sometimes we forget that culture sort of bubbles up. It doesn't always just come down.
Right.
So how can ELL teachers, how can the folks in the building who may not even be teachers, how can they positively impact the culture in the school district for success for these students?
There's many ways. I would ask that you ask your principals, assistant principals, to come in your classroom and talk to children, to meet children, to watch how you teach, because I think there's a benefit to that. And our children, just like our young people today, our students, really have a voice that should be and need to be heard. I work on a college campus. Dakota County Technical College is where we're housed. And I'm watching this decline in enrollment that is happening while we keep hearing we need to get young people workforce ready. Instruction, and the instruction that happens at the college level is very different than what's happening at the pre-K-12 level. And there's an absent narrative around EL and quality instruction. Just like the standards of effective practice that have come out. Are people familiar with that? Standards of effective practice? Whoa. Yeah, we're supposed to be moving that forward as a state. And I would encourage you to go back and look at the standards of effective practice, because that is what should be guiding how we approach teacher preparedness and learning in the future.
So I understand that we need to keep the trains on time, so we've now come to the end for this presentation. But I do want to leave you with a couple of thoughts and close. We touched at a very high level this idea of being intentional in changing culture, changing the way in which ELL is seen, not just within the school district, but in the broader society. So please look for more from the Minnesota Humanities Center and convenings that we do with several superintendents within the state to do that. So in the building, in the classroom, can bring about significant change within ELL. I think that there's also work that's being done within the Department of Education and other, what might historically have been other silos, that there is an opportunity for ELL leaders within the state to make it more holistic, to make it more connected for ELL students. And that's ethnic studies, that's indigenous studies, but I will dare say, though, just in the functioning of the building, what if ELL was the area where the cool kids hung out? Because this is where the excitement is happening about art and dance and culture, right? Socialization also happens within schools. So to this extent, could ELL be centered in the socialization piece, not just sort of in the writing, reading, and arithmetic, right? The 3 R's. So thank you so much for joining us for this plenary. I'm sorry we did not get a chance to answer all the questions. They're fantastic questions, and I'm sorry that we only got 60 minutes, but we're connected. We're going to stay connected within this space and look for more partnership and collaboration with the Minnesota Humanities Center. Thank you all. Appreciate you.